Drop it on them random.
What up, y'all? Welcome to another episode of Hip Hop Now Podcast Reviews. I am your host, Vegas of Hip Hop Now Podcast. Returning listeners, I appreciate you. New listeners, check it out. We do this periodically, but there's a ton of content here. And this is kind of what we do now. Let me preference. I got to do this every time. I'm sorry for those who listen all the time, but I just got to set the record straight. When I review an album, right? Hip hop album in particular. Shout out to hip hop. When I review an album, I really spend some quality time with it. And why am I not reviewing this album or that album versus this album or that album? Well, it's very easy. I'm really trying to hit on the albums, at least this year, that stand out. The albums that a lot of people are talking about, whether they like it or not. Whether it's debatable, whether it's fairly loved, whether it's revered, whether it's getting trashed because it's completely whack. Those are the albums that I'm going to focus on. And obviously in 2020, there's been a lot going on outside of the music genre. So there's been a scarcity in releases. You know what I'm saying? We've gotten dope tracks and dope albums and albums in general, but probably not as much as we would get if some of these artists could tour these albums. Obviously they can't because of what's going on. So let's get right into it. The album I'm reviewing today is an album that I took my time with. I really took my time with. It's a new album, debut album from Stove God Cooks, featuring Roc Marciano on the beats. It's called Reasonable Drought. Now, if you let the hip-hop internet tell you this is like top 5 of 2020, hands down. Like, that is the word on the streets for a number of reasons. And I'm going to tell you my journey through hearing this album and then what I felt most recently. Now, Stove God Cooks, you know what I'm saying, he has a history. This is his debut album, but he's actually been in the game for a little while. He was connected with Busta Rhymes' Conglomerate label. Didn't really pop off for him there. But he was able, he also was connected with Lord Jamar, a brand Nubian, but it didn't pop off there. And I read a recent article where he basically said that when he was running with Lord Jamar and he was running with Busta Rhymes at one point with Conglomerate, he felt like the music he wanted to make wasn't meshing with their vision for him. You know what I'm saying? Or the type of music they make or the type of music they represented. So it never really worked out, in his opinion. And he met Roc Marciano, and he worked on a couple of things with a couple of projects with Roc Marciano, and slowly worked on Reasonable Drought. And it got to a point where Roc Marciano basically, said to Stove God Cooks, like, yo, let me just give you all the beats for this album instead of giving you a couple of tracks. And here you have Reasonable Drought. Now I'm going to say this straight off the bat. When I first heard this album, the beats are what got me. I like the beats instantly. The beats are straight up boom bap, head nod. If you're disgusted, you feel like that's old, why people still rapping like that or making those kinds of beats, this is not the album for you. But I gotta say, in the very beginning, I wasn't impressed with Stove God Cooks lyrically. Now, don't get me wrong. On a first listen, I'm not dissecting somebody's lyrical skill. I'm kind of taking in everything at the same time. The beats, the hooks, the rhymes, the flows, the voice, especially for someone who's, this is his debut and I've never really heard him like that. Probably heard him on a couple of tracks back in the day, but never really heard him to the point where I understand the style before he even came out. And I felt like okay, he you know what I think I heard is alright. You know what I'm saying? It's not bad at all. But I'm really more attracted to the beats than I'm attracted to the rhymes. And on a couple of listens, you know, and seeing how much people love it, I figured, well, I mean, I do this anyway. Let me just keep listening. And then I found myself listening without it being about critiquing. You know what I'm saying? Um, and listening more to the lyrics. And Stove God Cooks is a very lyrical dude. He's has no features on this whole album, right? So those people who hate no features, this is for you. It's 12 songs, which you know is right up my alley. And I felt like he held it down, but there was some diversity that I kind of felt like that was missing because the dude can rap. Let's not get that mistaken. The dude can rap. You know what I'm saying? He got bars. But at the end of the day, when your content is so closely tied to, and not saying he did this on purpose, but so for me as a listener, so closely tied to the content of Griselda Records, who I listen to every project they release, and they release a ton of projects. I can't really separate you from them. I don't feel like he's better than them. You know what I'm saying? I feel like maybe he's somewhat on par with them. But I've never been a fan of, well, if I'm getting good pizza at this pizza shop, why am I going over here for this pizza? Even if their pizza is good. I'm already over here, you know what I'm saying? So once I started to listen to it a little bit more and I started to settle down and just kind of vibe with it, I can see why a lot of people like this album. No features, coke rhymes, boo bap beats, lyrical, spiritual lyrics. You know what I'm saying? It's not like he's just really basic with the lyrics because he really isn't. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of very unique, like very smart rhymes. You know what I'm saying? When I say very smart rhymes, I'm not just talking about intelligence. I'm just talking about lyrically, like the way he puts his words together, the way he puts the similes together, the way he describes things, the way he flows on different tracks and on different hooks. And it works, you know what I'm saying? And I feel like at the end of the day, yes, is one of the best of the year. But I think if it was a different year with more content coming out at a regular steam, and I mean, who's to say the rest of the stuff could have been whack, for all we know. But I feel like this is a different year, and I feel like there is a drought, and maybe that's the irony, maybe that's the charm of Reasonable Drought. Maybe it's the fact that you're not getting as much as you used to, and here you have a dude with a debut that is basically hot. Now, some of my favorite tracks on here, Rolls Royce Brake Lights, Break the Pyrex is dope, John Starks, Cocaine Cologne, Jim Bohemian. Like, it's 12 tracks on here, and the majority of them are dope. Not many go over 4 minutes, maybe 3 of them go over 4 minutes. And Roc Marciano on the production is perfect for Stove God Cook's flow, for his rhymes, for his cadence. And I think, again, to kind of tail back to what I was saying originally with his bars, I think it was less about him lyrically that made me not rush out and say this is one of the best of the year. And it had more to do with his voice and flow. Let me explain. I've never been a fan in recent years of things that remind me too much of the 90s. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to release music that reminds you of the 90s. It's only when I feel like it's a little obsessive. Now, some may say, well, this is original rap. Well, no, it's not, because we know what original rap is. That's Yes, yes, y'all, and you don't stop. We know it's that, right? That's original rap. Let's not skip over that era. But I get it. It's upgraded and it's bars, you know what I'm saying? But I just sometimes his voice, and I mean he can't do nothing about his voice. I haven't watched the interview with him to see if he talks similar to that, but that's the way he flows. And it just reminded me of the 90s. And sometimes when I hear rappers who remind me too much of the 90s, I feel like they're stuck, right? They're rhyming it in a cadence, they're picking a beat from a time that's long since passed. Now, it's easy for me to say that because I was there. So I enjoyed the 90s while I was there, and I enjoy going back to some of those classic albums and flows and hooks and videos from the 90s, especially the early 90s, early to mid 90s. But I don't want to hear nothing new that mimics that. I want to hear something that pays homage to those times, but also moves forward. And I think Stove God Cooks does that. I think I needed to step outside of the hype that was surrounding this album and really sit down and listen to it and enjoy it for what it is. Now, I can't say that if somehow we have, let's say, 5 albums from now that come out that are crazy, that are, pushing the genre forward, and some people call it a classic, this will be in my honorable mentions. But it's in my top 5 only because of circumstance, right? There's not a lot of dope music that came out to begin with, and this is easily one of the best. Easily. It's just dope. So if you've never heard of Stove God Cooks, do yourself a favor. Well, let me say this. If you've never heard of him, but you love boom bap hip hop, do yourself a favor and listen to this album right now. Stove God Cooks. This is a dope album. It's a dope debut. The production is right up my alley. I mean, this is coming from a guy who loves Do-Rag Dynasty. And Do-Rag Dynasty kind of contradicts what I said about the 90s stuff. But I still love it. Something about it, I love it. And I kind of feel that way about this. Even though it didn't hit me initially, it did grow on me and became one of the albums that I listen to frequently. It's in my heavy rotation right now. Now, if you're a person who feels like, I don't want to hear none of that trapped in the 90s, boom bap, lyrical, spiritual, miracle, get the spirituals, like whatever, you would not like this album at all. You wouldn't like nothing about this album. This album is everything you hate about that era or that group or sect of hip hop. You just won't like it. But we're using the word hip hop. And if you use the word hip hop, once you hear Rolls Royce brake lights, once that beat drop, you gotta feel something. If you don't feel something, you're not a hip hop head. Now, just to give you a couple of other things to go with that maybe will, for those who haven't heard it, that will kind of make you get a vibe of what I'm trying to express about this album. It feels a little bit like Ghostface, right? Feel a little bit like that Ghostface. A little bit of, dare I say, Pusha T with the coke rhymes, a little bit, a little bit of Griselda. It's almost like a little bit of everything. Everything you like, a little bit of Cuban Links. Just a little bit of everything. And he has no features. Now, honestly, I feel like 1 or 2 features would have helped break a little bit of the monotony, because I'm not going to lie, even with 12 tracks, at one point, when you get probably somewhere in the middle, maybe around Money Puddles, I do get a little bit of fatigue of hearing him only. But that's a sign of the times, you know what I'm saying? We're just used to hearing features. And I don't feel necessarily that, I don't know what to expect from a follow-up, put it that way. but as a debut, it's a pretty dope album. If you ask me, it's definitely in my top 5 of the year as it is right now. And I think as a hip hop fan, you should check it out. The album's called Reasonable Drought by Stove God Cooks, produced entirely by Roc Marciano. That's going to do it for me. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at VegasWorldINC and check out my weekly podcast, Hip Hop Now Podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, y'all, I am not a critic. I'm a fan. Peace.
Drop it on the random.